Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Carrow Road. I've got a slight cold. Norwich City have lost. Not been a great afternoon all round, and I feel like I'm going to end up repeating a lot of what we've said throughout this season. To be honest, I think let's start with the game, because that's probably the easiest place to start. Norwich City have been beaten here today 1-0 by Sheffield United. It was a McAtee goal. In the second half, it was a scruffy goal, but the better team won. Sheffield United had more control throughout the game. They had more poise, more quality. Kind of felt like they had gears to go through if they needed to. It was a typical performance of a team that is going to get promoted automatically, coming to a side, knowing that they needed a win and kind of grinding one out. And that was their performance. I thought they were efficient without necessarily blowing Norwich City away. It was a competitive fixture for long periods of it, but purely in terms of kind of work rate rather than quality. I think when it came to needing to win the game, Sheffield United found the way. That's a mark of a good team. Norwich City didn't have a shot until the 92nd minute. Structurally, we're all over the place. Just feel an absolute mile off. And where I am now is, look, we can talk about the playoffs and we can talk about how next week at Blackburn is a massive game, and it's 4 points, but after Easter Monday they might be in there. That's all fine, but getting into the playoffs to what end is kind of what I feel, because this group of players is quite clearly now, for everyone, not good enough to be playing Premier League football next season, irrespective of how they do it. Now that you can view that as being very defeatist, and yes, there's a chance mathematically you have to go about doing it, and you have to try and do it, and I get that. But what? Norwich finished 6th. They play Middlesbrough in the playoffs. They get beaten over 2 legs. Is that what anyone wants? I'm not really sure. And I think this group and where it is now, and we've spoken about this so much, there needs to be, I'd even argue, revolution rather than evolution. It just needs to take a big hammer to this. It's a tired squad. It's a tired football club. It needs change, and it's needed change for a little while. And I don't purely mean in terms of the playing group. I think structurally and the way it operates, things need to shift. But I recognise that the onus and the focus is going to be on the playing squad. And it's performances like this, when you've got David Wagner coming out. Dean Smith used to say it a lot as well, and say, there's not a massive issue with work rate or workload, or players aren't, it's not the case that players are downing tools and not trying. And I think I've said that throughout the season. That's never been the case for this group. They're just not good enough. You've got players who aren't at the levels they were when Norwich City have won previous championship titles. You've got players who haven't filled their potential in this. You've got players who were signed for big money relative to Norwich City who haven't lived up to expectations. And the whole thing is on a slide, and has been on a slide for a while. And I think I said this, might have been after Luton, but I've definitely said it in one of these this season. It just feels like a club that is kind of just sliding. Everything's kind of sliding. The atmosphere in this place is sliding. The quality on the pitch is sliding. And that's where the club is, and something needs to be done this summer to arrest that, and to try and inject some life and some enthusiasm and some optimism into this, because I know it, because I come on and cover Norwich City every single week, home and away. I will have been to every single game this season, all being well, between the next 7 games, and I've not really felt enthusiastic about the football. I felt enthusiastic about other aspects, but not necessarily the football on display, and that's really problematic for them in the long term. And in terms of keeping people in this stadium, life's expensive, football's expensive. You need to offer a product that people want to come and watch, and at the moment this group of players don't really offer that. And my concern more broadly is that every time someone comes and speaks about Norwich City, and I'm talking sort of higher level, and there is kind of talk about the future, it's always, we want to be a Premier League club. We want to be a Premier League club, which is fine, but no one's stripping it back. How do you become a Premier League football club? What is the aim and the idea around that? That's the bit that I think the substance behind it that's lacking a little bit at the moment. And the whole thing, just for me, needs a realignment. And that doesn't mean that people need to leave, or I'm not saying any of that. I think it just needs a refocus, a realignment of what the idea is here. But ultimately some real churn on the pitch as well. You've got players there who, as I said, haven't lived up to expectations, haven't performed good enough. And that's why, to me, it's kind of irrelevant about whether this group finishes 6th or 5th or 7th or 8th. Doesn't matter. Because they're not going to go up. They're not going to get promoted. I don't think they're going to get in the playoffs, let alone get promoted. But, excuse me, it's just a really sad cycle at the moment. And I personally, and I'm sure some fans as well, and you can sense it in this stadium as well, they don't believe. And I think there's this willingness now for everything just to limp to the end of the season, and then hopefully a summer of real change on the pitch. And as I said, that maybe that realignment off it that needs to happen as well, because it's stale, it's tired, and that's probably where we end up with today, because this was totally predictable. I looked at when the teams dropped and, okay, he's playing 2 in midfield. That feels quite short against Sheffield United's 3 in terms of trying to wrestle control in that area. Tactically and structurally, when they build up, they basically don't build up with any central players. Ben Lee, who writes a column for us every week, kind of a tactical dissection of matches, has spoken about this a lot. And when McLean drops into the back 3 to build, which he did do at times today, but Sheffield United kind of stuffed that out pretty early, it leaves Norwich with essentially Gabriel Sara as their middle player against probably in a pocket of 5 or 6 opponent players. And that then forces them to go direct, which is fine, but then you need someone to kind of, win the ball, but also get on the second ball and try and make something happen off that. And they don't have it. They play with a fairly flat 4. It's just tactically very strange at points, and they leave a massive vacuum. So when the ball gets turned over, or if the defender wins the header, suddenly you've got 4 Norwich players in attacking positions that are essentially out of the game. So that's frustrating. But look, distill everything down. 4 games ago, Norwich had just beaten Millwall. There wasn't a feeling they would get into the playoffs. There was an expectation. There was a belief that they would get into the playoffs. Since then, they've lost 1-0 to Sunderland. They've drawn away at Huddersfield. They've drawn 0-0 with Stoke. And they've lost 1-0 to Sheffield United. They've scored 1 goal. Their last shot on target, which was today, came in 92 minutes. Before that, it was the 4th minute against Stoke. So they've gone pretty much a whole game without having a shot on target across 2 matches. Just not good enough for this group of players. There are players out on that pitch who cost substantial sums of money, who are not contributing, who we are not seeing the best of week in, week out. There's not consistency, there's not quality. It's tired. And, I feel like we could stand here and discuss till the cows come home about what needs to change and what aspects need to change. But actually, I just find myself despairing at it, to be honest. The fact that this group of players, with the quality, with the expectation that everyone wrapped around this season, have ended up here. And look, this is irrespective of them sort of galvanising the campaign and finishing in the top 6. The level of underperformance this year has been absolutely staggering. And yes, I recognise it could be a lot worse. Of course it could. But I actually think it's slightly... Sorry, I've picked a wrong moment to have a dodgy voice, but it's a damning indictment on this division that Norwich City are as close to the top 6 as they are, and the fact they could still get into the top 6 is pretty laughable, to be honest, with the levels of performance that they muster up. And it's all very well and good saying they have X amount of games to do it, and they've got 7 games left. I think they'll probably need to win 5. That's a tall order. That for a group of players who struggle to really put together performances back to back, to then expect them to go and win 5 of their last 7 is a tall order. Given they've got to go to Blackburn, they've got to go to Middlesbrough, they've got to go to West Brom. You're essentially talking about the need to win at least one of those in all the rest of the games. I don't see it personally. And that's where this becomes really difficult. Obviously, look, next week is massive. That's why I'm not standing here saying the playoff dream is completely dead, because yes, it's 4 points, but actually, if they beat Blackburn next week, suddenly it becomes 1 point. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's likely that they're going to finish there, but I don't think anyone can say that it's kind of the end of the road at this point. But I felt, given they needed 5 wins, they would need to win all of their remaining home games, including today. They haven't done that. They've lost to a Sheffield United side who are by far the better team. who are going to be playing Premier League football next season, who are going to go up automatically, who have some wonderful talent. Both young players and also what they've done is kind of evolved quite nicely. You saw that the players they brought off the bench, Billy Sharp, Ollie Norwood, John Fleck, Chris Basham, all of whom were involved in that 18-19 team that pushed Norwich City so hard in that campaign. They started on the bench. It's all about McAtee, Doyle, two players who are on loan from Manchester City, Illiman and Dye, who's a glorious footballer to watch. And they're coached in a system that allows them to get the best of them. So this is a disappointing day, but quite predictable. And for me, just underlines where Norwich City are and underpins where Norwich City are, and the fact that all it will do, in my view, is increase those calls for change come the end of the season. And the performance levels since Millwall have dropped off a cliff. Norwich have scored one goal. They lack creativity, they lack ideas, they lack imagination, they lack identity at points. There's a consistency in terms of how they set up. That's about it. I think the rest of it is pretty flat, and I can see this season petering out pretty rapidly. If they don't win at Blackburn next week, it's done for me. We can all go home and forget about it, and then probably the inquest can start. But this game decided by a James McAtee goal. I did want to give some credit to the officials, because I think in real time it looked an absolute mile offside. I've seen replays and he is onside. Grant Hanley's playing him on. It's a wonderful, wonderful decision by the assistant referee, who received a lot of flack actually after that from Norwich's players and Norwich's coaching staff. I think David Wagner's done a press conference and said there was a pass in the build-up that he felt was offside. I'd have to watch it back, but I certainly didn't see or feel that, nor did I see anyone on the pitch appeal for it at the time. But that's not why Norwich City lost this game today. Sheffield United hit the bar twice. First through the defenders, whose name I'm not even going to try and pronounce when I sound like this, because I'll produce loads of snot and it won't be pretty for any of you watching. And then Billy Sharp towards the end as well. So Norwich City were beaten by a team that was far superior to them, far better than them, and the team that is the second best team in the Championship behind Burnley, who are the clear runaway leaders. So not a particularly positive afternoon at Carrow Road, not in terms of weather, in terms of my voice, or in terms of results, but probably one that has offered, I don't know if a reality check is the right word, because I think most people are feeling relatively flat and relatively downbeat about their prospects anyway, but certainly maybe a clarity now as to where we are. Next week is must win. It's must win. We're in that now. They need to win 5 of 7. It's not impossible. I would suggest it's highly unlikely. And even then, I think they get done over 2 legs to whoever finishes third. So yeah, fun and games. I'm sorry I couldn't be more upbeat than that. Hopefully it's a little bit more positive next week, and they've beaten Blackburn and we're saying, oh, hang on a minute. But I think I've been fairly consistent over the last few weeks that I see Norwich falling just short, and its performance is like today, where it's just so flat and devoid of quality and creativity and ideas, that makes you believe that. Interesting one to note, Temi Pukki got pulled off, replaced by Abu Kamara. I thought Norwich subs more widely were interesting today. Abu Kamara, Crystal Solis, Liam Gibbs, Sam McCallum felt very forward looking to me. Whether we can read anything into that or not, I don't know. Thought there was a lot of meh on the pitch in terms of performances. And yeah, it's the type of result that Norwich City were able to achieve when they get promoted out of this division. I remember a win away at Middlesbrough. I think Cornel Hernandez scored. Really quite. It was a good goal, but it was a little bit scrappy. Went through a few bodies. That's what I compare the Sheffield United result to, but absolutely massive given what Neil Warnock has done at Huddersfield this afternoon in recording a pretty handsome win over his former employers. So Sheffield United with a game in hand with a 6-point cushion. I think you'd say they're pretty much there now. So a big afternoon for them as well. I'm not going to waste any of more of my voice speaking about that. So thank you very much for joining me. Of course, plenty more reaction and analysis to come on Pinkham.com and the Pinkham Plus app. Go and enjoy your Saturday evening. Try not to think about Norwich City or football, although I understand that's difficult. And I'll see you on Good Friday at Ewood Park. Try and contain your excitement, because I cannot. Thanks for watching, guys.